Hello and welcome to another video from CoVid Central in Mulhouse. I'm talking to my CENPROFDOC students about their final assignment. Hi guys, first of all, hope you are all doing well and you're all healthy. Same goes for your families too. That's the most important. I was going to, as you know, carry on with the assignment we were actually doing, which was to do with sustainability and to get you to articulate and present something to the powers that be at the university. But that would only really work if I could get everybody together, and it would work better physically and in a much less complicated manner, of course. Now, that I don't think is going to happen because we're in confinement still until the 15th of May. And I think it's a bit too ambitious to pull everything together to do a complete round-robin conference and presentation session. Anyway, I'm going to give you something else to do because actually I think your reports as they were produced, which you were going to put together in a particular form to present, I thought they stood on their own very well. I thought you'd done that pretty well. So don't worry about it altogether too much if we didn't get to quite finish it off. I think the way you went to the attention to detail in the action programs was very, very credible. So what are we going to do now for our last piece of work together? Well, it would be silly to miss out on the opportunity to actually consider what is going on around us in relation to, well, COVID obviously, but in relation to how we're using technologies, the extent to which we're using technologies much more significantly, and whether this is going to represent a wholesale change in the way we define work or education, etc. This could well be a massive new departure for the new technologies with which you're going to be working, and perhaps a considerable re-emphasizing of your career potential. I think there's going to be a lot more opportunities out there for you now because people are going to start shifting their investments and their interests towards these new technologies and digital publication, transferring information, influence, etc., supporting working from home, for example. So what I've done is to set up a new assignment for you. Now, you know where to go to find it. If you go to the normal place on Tonyversity and you then scroll down the menu for FSSEG and you highlight or you hover over CENPROFDOC, you will see that there's a spring out green menu to the right, and right on the top of it there's something that's called Confinement and ICT. ICT, as you know, Information and Communication Technologies. Nobody ever talks about that long-winded phrase now, it's just ICT. Now, I'm basically proposing to you a project which asks you to look at this transforming effect of technology, the reliance that we have on these technologies, the way we're now choosing to use them. Can we go back to the way things were before? I'm minded in saying that a little bit of the Second World War and the First World War to some degree too. What happened? The guys all went off to war, and ladies were brought into factories to do jobs that they were told were men's work and women couldn't possibly do it. And then, okay, the guys came home, those who remained, of course, came home to find that women were no longer just standing behind the sink. They were doing work of equal value to the work that men had been doing. Were they simply going to go back to the sink and say, okay, darling, you know, you can take over and do the job that I've been doing? No, 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 no. We might have been back to peace, but the experience of war made us, society, people in that society, different. My thesis for you is that quite conceivably, that is what we're going to find here. At the moment, people are talking about the fact that the COVID war is over, numbers are on the decline. I don't see that yet, not by a long way. And I think we might be being far too ambitious to imagine that we're all going to come out into the sunshine with no risk of a second wave within as little as a month's time. I think that might actually change, but we'll have to see. I'm not a doctor, how the hell do I know? But what I strongly suspect is that things will not go back to being the way they were before. And I'm going to ask you to speculate from what you see around you about how we're now using technologies to support each other, to transfer vital pieces of information, to support the flow of information which we call work from home to what used to be the workplace. Are we simply all going to go back to work the way we were? I suspect not. I suspect employers are going to change things. So I have written instructions for you on a project which asks you to look at technologies, how they're being used under COVID, and to ask you what you feel might actually be the future for new technologies and communications once we come back from the guerre that Mr. Macron said we were in, and we are now, hopefully, shortly, at peace again. But as per my Second World War example, will things go back to being the way they were? I suspect not, and I'd like to know what you think about that. Okay? So, if you go to that page, you will see certain instructions. If you don't mind, I'll refresh my memory and read them. Here are a number of questions that I want you to think about, and then I want you to do something with them in the form of a video or an audio recording, please. Ideally in pairs, if the distance doesn't make that impossible for you to do. I would think with your knowledge it shouldn't. So if you worked in pairs, or if you preferred as an individual, that's fine, to produce a video maybe of 10-15 minutes or an audio file of 10-15 minutes, and then you get it to me by a delivery date of the 8th of May, the 8th of May. But remember, of course, you've either got to have it hosted and send me a link so I can go and find it, download it or stream it, but it might not just simply attach to an email. So please think about the file size and how you're going to get it hosted so that I can see it. I'm putting my stuff like this video on YouTube under my YouTube channel. Maybe you can do the same, up to you. Okay, so video or audio format. So the 4 or 5 things I want you to think about are these. What does all this mean for you as far as your speciality is concerned and the use of new technologies and digital publication? What will it mean for the future of your speciality, your chosen subject? Will this discontinuity, this sudden shock that's come from nowhere, perhaps be seen with hindsight as a watershed, a new departure, if you like, in which new communication technologies will be taken up to a far greater degree in our future personal, professional and political lives? Will we come to appreciate the extent to which all of our lives are dependent upon these technologies? What might have happened in the COVID crisis had the technological systems that we have not been there or not worked with all of the extra traffic? To what extent do you feel that design of work will change as a result of this experience? So here's the instruction. If you don't mind, I will actually read that. In pairs or on an individual basis, if you prefer, consider these issues that I've just read from the basis of what you see around you currently. So simply look, you feel what's out there, you see what's happening. You see self-help groups and they're all held together by technology and exchanging information. You hear about education and everything is all of a sudden online. My son is taking an online course as I do this. So, using evidence to support your assertions, state why and how you believe the experience of and reliance upon new digital communication technologies during confinement may change the face of work and life in general in the future. Okay, the format I've told you about, audio or video based. Okay, so that's essentially your instructions, and they are on my website for you to find. Excuse me. So some thoughts about this. The speed of change. In November, a few people somewhere around the wildlife market in Wuhan, in China, were beginning to notice that there were people getting ill. In December, these people were in hospital. In December, one medic tried to warn the Chinese state and was warned off and threatened, etc., as he was trying to warn people about how difficult this virus was going to be to control. He, as you know, has sadly died trying to save us all by giving us an early warning. We didn't really know anything about it until perhaps mid-late February, and then mid-March, we were sent home and we were in confinement, which meant for a lot of people, they couldn't work. Only those of us who have the opportunity to teletravail, to work from home, or those of us who have an essential job in medicine or in transport logistics and food and medicine service, etc. Only those were working. People being sent home for being outside, people without a piece of paper being sent home or threatened or fined. This has become normal in a country that prides itself upon freedom, but obviously not freedom to infect everybody else, so there has to be limits. The speed of this was enormous. Well, one thing that's very good about new technology is the speed with which it can adopt and adapt. You know how fast these technologies work, and you also realize that levels of web use, etc., running through servers was up 40% in almost a heartbeat. Heaven knows what it is now. So you've got a medium that's very, very resilient, and it's been able to support the transfer of what much was being done in other media has now shifted to the internet. Let me give you an example. The week after the February holidays, I came home from England and I had flu. I was ill. I couldn't come in to teach, but for each class I couldn't teach, I reminded them where they were on the program, directed them towards materials online, told them what my expectations were, what I wanted to be produced, that I was there to help. But that made no difference at all as far as the university was concerned. As far as they were concerned, I wasn't teaching. Students weren't learning at all, which was not the case. Progress was being made, but my name was taken off our system, which records what classes you've taught and therefore whether you get paid or not. A week later, just a week later, when we were told, those of us who have pre-existing conditions, as you know, I'm diabetic, we were told to stay at home and telework. All of a sudden, it was acceptable. So in other words, there was an acceptance all of a sudden that learning can take place without necessarily having a teacher in the classroom physically face-to-face with a student. Well, teachers have known that for ages. Students have known that for ages. But the administrative system couldn't cope with that. The only way it could measure it was to measure teacher input in the face-to-face. Was he there? Yes. Was he there? No. Paid? Not paid. And now, all of a sudden, that's completely changed. I would imagine the Éducation nationale and every university and every school in the country is now going to be looking at what it can do that does not necessarily require teachers to be face-to-face all the time. This is a frightening thing, because if, for example, before I retired in 3 or 4 years' time maybe, I put everything I've ever taught, and I did full-length lectures, and I put them up there online, the university would just say, well, thank you, fine, we won't need to replace you, Tony, because we've got all your materials. We'll just run them on distance learning. It's quite frightening for somebody whose unique selling proposition is their presence with a group of students in front of them. It means that things are going to be radically different. So here's a wholesale change. It's going to take time to fight our way through to some kind of new future. But certainly, if the Education Nationale is saying, at very short notice, we did things very credibly at school and at universities to replace face-to-face teaching, and learning did happen. It might not have been in the same way, to the same degree, to exactly the same efficiency and effectiveness, but it sure happened. Then the question is, where can it happen to best effect? Are there things that in any course we could do at distance, and perhaps should be done at distance, but reasons of simplicity, we don't perhaps need a full-time teacher to lead that. It's fairly self-explanatory. All the materials are up there. You can back it up by being accessible at various times during the week, etc. We're going to have to address that. So this has the potential to change the whole of the educational system. Maybe the same goes for work. What about all these companies who have massive, great, expensive offices in big cities and towns? It takes people ages to get to them, 2 or 3 hours a day in the morning, 2 or 3 hours at night. You're wasting a quarter of the day in actually traveling to work. And you're in a car, often polluting like hell, being stuck in traffic jams on the periphery around Paris, on the M25 around London. We could, if we could reduce the amount of people who actually have to physically go to a place called work, and we would define work as the stuff we do for our employer, then if we could do that at home, a number of things happen. The companies don't have to have massive high-rise office space in major cities. They can take them out and they can make them smaller as long as the strength and reliability of the electronic connections are actually there. It's going to save them money. Number two, it's going to enable them to offer employees a much greater sense of flexibility. Hey, Tony, would you like not to have to drive to Paris 3 hours a day, spend a fortune on petrol and waste a quarter of your day actually sitting in a car doing nothing but getting tired, hot and frustrated and polluting the universe? You could save an awful lot of money and an awful lot of time. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Wouldn't that just be like a significant pay rise to you? So we're not going to pay you any more this coming year. In fact, we might even pay you a little bit less, but at least you can keep your job. At least you don't have to do the traveling. At least you've got more flexibility. You can be happier, fitter, and spend more time with your family. There are so many payoffs there for you. I'm sure you perhaps accept a little bit less or accept not to have a rise. I can see that coming right around the corner. So what I'm asking you to do, having given you just a couple of examples, is to look at how you think this is going to, we use the phrase, to pan out, how it's going to work itself out. What do you think are going to be the major changes? I could see that companies are going to have a much greater reliability on new technologies. The universities as well. I mean, at the moment, let's take one department that I work for, the FLSH. The FLSH has one IT man, technician, who looks after the computers, makes sure they're all up, looks after the network, etc. We have no one who is an information technology learning support person who could help us develop materials ourselves. Oh, at the moment, of course, in the new learning center, there's lots of material online for that. But sometimes when you do not have the confidence, you do not have your training, you need somebody physically to help you. Not just somebody who knows about the technology, but somebody who understands teaching and what you're trying to achieve. Maybe there's an opportunity for a whole new cadre of people who will become a bridge between the educationalists and the technology, with learning overarching over the pair of them. No longer just he deals with the technology, you deal with the teaching, but you're both in it together. Maybe there are massive new opportunities for employment here. I suspect companies, as well as schools and universities and colleges, are going to have more IT support, not just to the technology, but to the work that's going to move across it, a kind of a hybrid position. This is involving the transmission of information and communication, making it seamless, making it more like the communication that we have when we're together. We need to bridge those gaps from the technology side, from, in my case, the teaching side. Here's just a few things I'm seeing, but this is your domain. This is your future. How do you see it? That's the big question that I'm asking. Okay? So, there we go. It's a video or an audio to do by the 8th of May, please. Le 8 May, it's an easy date to remember for all sorts of reasons. So, please, would you get on with that? If you have any questions, then please refer to me. You can get hold of me on email virtually anytime. I'll pick it up on my phone if I'm not sitting in front of my computer. But there we go. I very much would like to see what you think about your future. Of course, all in impeccable English where you can do it. Okay, I'm not too worried about video or audio quality as long as I can hear things. You don't have to go into a studio for this. I'm not marking it that way, but I think it's appropriate to see how you use the technologies that you're going to be working within your working life. So there we go. I better stop now before this video gets too long to be able to upload to YouTube. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Goodbye.